Okay, so continuing the readings on the Four Noble Truths. And I'll start out by reading from the Samyutta Nikaya, in particular excerpts from the Satya Samyutta. Satya means truth. And these will be various translations by Ajahn Jeff. And the first one I'll read is one we're all familiar with, which is just an excerpt from saying the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, but sometimes it can be helpful to hear a different translation. There are these two extremes that are not to be indulged in by one who has gone forth. Which two? That which is devoted to sensual pleasure in connection with sensuality, base, vulgar, common, ignoble, unprofitable, and that which is devoted to self-affliction, painful, ignoble, unprofitable. Avoiding both of these extremes, the middle way realized by the Tathagata, producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. And what is the middle way realized by the Tathagata? That producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. Precisely this Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is the middle way realized by the Tathagata, that producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of stress. Birth is stressful. Aging is stressful. Death is stressful. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the five clinging aggregates are stressful. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the origination of stress. The craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now here and now there. Craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the cessation of stress. The remainderless fading and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, and letting go of that very craving. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Precisely this Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Now I'll be reading other various short suttas from the Satya Samyutta. This is 5620, real. Monks, these four things are real, not unreal, not otherwise. Which four? This is stress is real, not unreal, not otherwise. This is the origination of stress is real, not unreal, not otherwise. This is the cessation of stress is real, not unreal, not otherwise. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress is real, not unreal, not otherwise. These are the four things that are real, not unreal, not otherwise. Therefore, your duty is the contemplation. This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. Your duty is the contemplation. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. (5630) Gavampati. On one occasion, a larger number of elder monks were staying among the Chetyas at Sahajani. And on that occasion, a large number of elder monks, after the meal, on returning from their alms round, were sitting gathered together in a pavilion when this discussion arose. Is it the case that whoever sees stress also sees the origination of stress, the cessation of stress, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress? When this was said, Venerable Gavampati, the elder, said, "Face to face with the Blessed One, did I hear this, friends? Face to face did I receive it. Monks, whoever sees stress also sees the origination of stress, the cessation of stress, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Whoever sees the origination of stress also sees stress, the cessation of stress, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Whoever sees the cessation of stress also sees stress, the origination of stress, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Whoever sees the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress also sees stress, the origination of stress, and the cessation of stress." (5631) Simsapa leaves. Once when the Blessed One was staying near Kosambi in the Simsapa forest, then picking up a few Simsapa leaves with his hand, he asked the monks, "What do you think, monks? Which are more numerous, the few Simsapa leaves in my hand, or those overhead in the Simsapa forest?" "The leaves in the hand of the Blessed One are few in number, Lord. Those overhead in the forest are far more numerous." In the same way, monks, those things that I have known with direct knowledge, but have not taught, are far more numerous than what I have taught. And why haven't I taught them? Because they are not connected with the goal, do not relate to the rudiments of the holy life, and do not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. That is why I have not taught them. And what have I taught? This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This is what I have taught. And why have I taught these things? Because they are connected with the goal, relate to the rudiments of the holy life, and lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. This is why I have taught them. Therefore, your duty is the contemplation. This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. Your duty is the contemplation. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. (5635) 100 spears. Monks, suppose there was a man whose lifespan was 100 years, who would live to 100. Someone would say to him, "Look here, fellow, they will stab you at dawn with 100 spears, at noon with 100 spears, and again in the late afternoon with 100 spears. You thus stab day after day with 300 spears, will have a lifespan of 100 years, will live to be 100, and at the end of 100 years you will realize the Four Noble Truths that you have never realized before." Monks, a person who desired his own true benefit would do well to take up the offer. Why is that? From an inconceivable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident for the pain of blows from spears, swords, and axes. Even if this offer were to occur, I tell you that the realization of the Four Noble Truths would not be accompanied by pain and distress. Instead, I tell you the realization of the Four Noble Truths would be accompanied by pleasure and happiness. Which four? The noble truth of stress, the noble truth of the origination of stress, the noble truth of the cessation of stress, and the noble truth of the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Therefore, your duty is the contemplation. This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. Your duty is the contemplation. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. (5648) The whole. Monks, suppose that this great earth were totally covered with water, and a man were to toss a yoke with a single hole there. A wind from the east would push it west. A wind from the west would push it east. A wind from the north would push it south. A wind from the south would push it north. And suppose a blind sea turtle were there. It would come to the surface once every 100 years. Now what do you think? Would that blind sea turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, stick his neck into the yoke with a single hole? It would be a sheer coincidence, Lord, that the blind sea turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, would stick his neck into the yoke with a single hole. It's likewise a sheer coincidence that one obtains the human state. It's likewise a sheer coincidence that a Tathagata worthy and rightly self-awakened arises in the world. It's likewise a sheer coincidence that a Dhamma and Vinaya expounded by a Tathagata appears in the world. Now this human state has been obtained. A Tathagata worthy and rightly self-awakened has arisen in the world. A Dhamma and Vinaya expounded by a Tathagata appears in the world. Therefore your duty is the contemplation. This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. Your duty is the contemplation. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. And now I'll be playing an excerpt from a Dhamma talk by Lungpur Viradhammo about the Four Noble Truths. It's titled Reflections on the Four Noble Truths, and it was offered in 1997.
And right concentration is a mind which is balanced. And so those parts, those bits of us, where the ways we get imbalance is when we learn. So the imbalances of looking at that. The imbalances of energy that we experience, dullness or restlessness. And this we work with meditation, don't we? Sitting here and kind of, nodding off, God, what we're doing. Or just, looking at the clock all the time, thinking, when's going to ring the bell, and why not come here anyway? And so you go through that kind of stuff. And that's an imbalance, isn't it? The mind isn't that equanimity. And you just have to work with that. You just have to really go into it and say, well, how do I balance the mind? How do I bring samadhi or calmness to the mind when the mind is dull or when the mind is restless? And so this is the kind of, this sort of persistence of the practice that's important. That, like if you come to a retreat and you get dullness for 2 days, what a waste of time. I'm waiting for you to do a retreat, now I'm getting a sort of, getting blisters on my head from hitting the floor or something. And you think it's a waste of time, but it's not a waste of time, really, because that's where you have to learn how to balance the energy. Or, you just find yourself, annoyed at someone on a retreat. If one person drives up a tree, the way they eat or the way they kind of walk around, like pump into the hall, they shouldn't ignore them. If I didn't have that annoyance, I didn't do this retreat. That'd be annoyance into the retreat. Because that's the hindrance, that's the imbalance, that's where there is the samadhi. Or, you fall head over heels in love with someone. Oh, God, not now. This is not you. I don't need that. I want to be calm. That's the imbalance. That's what you have to look at. So whatever it is, it's the retreat. It's life. It's life. And actually, on the retreat, when we get these kinds of things, they're really good. You've got all this time and space to look at it. So if you feel really annoyed at something, you can really contemplate annoyance as an object of mind, rather than believing that annoyance is someone else, or feel guilty about it. Or if you really feel attracted to someone, sexually or emotionally, you can really look at the feeling of attraction and not believe that that's the 1 person in 5 billion that you really need to get to know. You can actually look at the feeling of attraction and not feel threatened by it. and think it's right or wrong or whatever, and I believe in it, and this is what attraction feels like. So you get down to kind of really understanding when the mind gets caught up and gets attached, and it's balanced. Doubt, doubt is a very powerful imbalancing factor. It's this obsession with us to know, to have an answer. This is the trouble with being clever. This is the flip side of being able to solve problems, is that you think you can know everything. And this is the sort of the difficulty of intellect. Is that intellect can certainly get answers, but intellect is conditioned. So at some level, intellect will always be involved with doubt. If you look at science now, just creates more and more doubts. We're scientists, we just have so much information at first hand. We feel sorry for them. Because if we did that, we could keep creating more and more information and more doubts, which is okay at the scientific level, but at the level of spirituality, it's a dead end. So doubt is doubt. So that's an important energy to understand, because doubt is a part of life. Because doubt is an object of life. And when we can see doubt as doubt, and not need to know, then we know. When you know doubt is doubt, you know. When you think you need an answer, you don't know doubt. That's stupid desire. And this is how the way we transcend intellect. It's the feeling of not knowing. The whole Zen tradition is based on that, isn't it? The Zen teacher says, don't know mind, right? Don't know. It's a feeling not to know. Ajahn Chah, much of his teaching was around uncertainty. I'd ask him, what's the program for horses? It's uncertain. He played with me for 2 hours. I wanted to go to another monastery. And I said, can I go to another monastery? He says, don't know. It's uncertain. He's totally crazy. But Ajahn Viradhammo, Ajahn Chah was invited to give a talk at Bayside in London. He visited London twice. And Christmas Humphreys, who was the president of the Buddhist Society in London, the High Court judge, phones up Ajahn Viradhammo and says he would like Ajahn Chah to give a talk from Bayside. And Ajahn Viradhammo goes to Ajahn Chah and says, Lord Paul, would you be willing to give a talk from Bayside? Ajahn Chah says, my name, uncertain. Poor Ajahn Viradhammo says, told the Christmas Humphreys and says, Ajahn Chah said it's uncertain. Christmas Humphreys bellows down the phone line, what do you mean it's uncertain? So then Ajahn Viradhammo goes to Ajahn Chah, and he played this for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And then finally, Ajahn Viradhammo goes to the day of the call, the cars arrive. And I just said, give it up, but it was. And he goes to the Lord Paul and says, Lord Paul, would you give the talk? He says, no, you give it. There we go. And he constantly kind of brings us into the state of not knowing. and the Westerners are kind of into father factors and that kind of mentality, having everything organized and fixed and sort of secured and known. And those it's unknown. And then at the time, they always know what was going on. We would never. So we never quite be sure when it was working, when it wasn't working. We always considered it a flaw. That was excellent, because the desire to know for me has been one of the fundamental flaws. What is rebirth? And how does rebirth actually work? Or does it work? And what's the connection between this life and the next life? Right? Or the unconditioned? What is Nibbana really? Is it big? So like you see, if you're working with the Four Noble Truths, and you're really saying, this is the way it is now, and there's a feeling of doubt, you say, what do I want? I want to know. And that's the problem. Wanting to know is not doubt. You see? And there's a subtlety in that, and more, as you offer, there's a subtlety in that. So if that's your question, you come back to first principles, you'll always see whether letting go is necessary. And then you bear something to without it ceases. And so now I find that saying out loud really helpful. Because it's sort of like the kind of things, so much in what we're doing in England is unknown, to entering into sort of new areas of, because our morality in the monastery is a kind of experiment, it's a different kind of a model, and many people actually criticize it because they say it's not a sort of traditional model of monasticism. It's very interesting, but it's something we don't know. And it's very thinking, what are we going to do? What's going to happen next? And so on. And to allow yourself not to know, let go of desire, not find what often good answers will come up. Spontaneity can function, and intuition can function. From that space, from that influence, we think. So the path is one which as discernment and right mindfulness and concentration gets stronger, then you get more and more insight. And then right thought becomes more powerful, lifestyle becomes more powerful. And so it's a kind of feedback loop. It keeps feeding back into itself, and the path becomes more and more clear and more and more refined. And that teaching I'd recommend that people really, like, if you have text, to learn the basic Pali words, or the basic English words, and we learn to chant them. So we're really getting in consciousness. Suffering is called cessation of path. Suffering, attachment to desire, letting go of desire is the path. And again and again and again, we get that into our minds. And what you do in contemplative, you get a theme like that going, and that becomes conscious by itself. It comes up rather than worldly garments. It comes into consciousness because you've encouraged it in your mind. And then it's like the practice does itself more and more because one is encouraged that in one's mind. So that's where learning comes in. That's where the skillful use of intellect comes in. Skillful use of study. But that's necessary. It's a necessary point. Okay, it's quite long, but I'll leave that for your reflection tonight. Any questions to anyone before we close?
Any questions or comments so far on anything so far?
So this suggestion for contemplating the noble truths is just sort of be done in like just a normal mind state, I guess, not particularly like when you're meditating, concentrating, just like throughout the day, I guess, reflecting on experience.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it suggests in general?
I'll just briefly answer it. My thought. I've found the teachings of Luang Por Sumedho and Ajahn Viradhammo how work with it. It's helpful just to notice, something doesn't go our way, which often happens in life, and just to know, oh, this is suffering, and see it in noble truth instead of like, oh, I'm suffering because whatever it is, some decision or something went wrong, and then we can also go beyond that to see just reflect where is the craving, or what are we attaching? What is it that we want that we're not getting, or that we don't want that we are getting? And so that gives us the opportunity to let go and experience the third noble truth, at least in a little way of not suffering. So, any of the other ajahns reflect on Pa?
Well, I think it's important to both in the meditation as well as in ordinary, because it's sort of what you're doing is trying to create a familiarity with that approach of contemplation, or how being mindful. It's not just sort of being mindful and honing in concentrating on an object, you're looking at it from the perspective of Four Noble Truths. So both in terms of day-to-day life as well as in the meditation, as the mind is more settled, then you tend to get a deeper perspective on the dynamics of how the mind works.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll read a little more. This is Lungpo Viradhammo's book, The Contemplative's Crafts, Internalizing Teachings of the Buddha, and chapter 14, Revisiting the Four Noble Truths. And I'll start by reading just a quote from that from Ajahn Dune, who was a disciple of Lungpo Man, D-U-N-E, and it's a well-known reformulation of the Four Noble Truths, which can be quite useful to contemplate. And here's Ajahn Lungpo Dune's reformulation. The mind sent outside is the origination of suffering. The result of the mind sent outside is suffering. The mind seeing the mind is the path. The result of the mind seeing the mind is the cessation of suffering. Okay, just read for a little bit. Revisiting the Four Noble Truths. In the remote region of northeast Thailand, there exists a lineage of highly accomplished Theravada Buddhist teachers dating back to the time of the Buddha. Unfortunately, their teachings, of which we have very few written records, have largely been lost to history. Little is known about these ascetic forest-dwelling monks prior to the time of Ajahn Mun, who is a renowned meditation teacher in this lineage, during the first half of the 20th century. Ajahn Mun was among the first of these Thai forest monks to have passages from his discourses recorded for posterity. He, like other practitioners of forest monasticism, focused on meditation and the development of contemplative insight as the vehicles for realizing enlightenment. Because we don't know too much about this lineage, our knowledge of the history of Theravada Buddhism tends to come from the ancient texts of the Pali Canon and their subsequent commentaries. These sources primarily emphasize the perspectives of urban monasteries. As centers of monastic learning and scholarship, these monasteries were considered the universities of their day and attracted the best Buddhist scholars and intellectuals. We're extremely fortunate that these texts have been preserved over the centuries. However, as a forest monk, a great part of my own learning stems from the oral tradition of a teacher instructing a pupil according to the pupil's needs and level of understanding of the Dhamma. This one-on-one interaction between a teacher and disciple is obviously very important, whether it involves a discussion of the Buddha's first discourse or coming to a contemporary understanding of what the attachment to rites and rituals means. Also, there's nothing like a real-life examination of a given theme by a living teacher who can illustrate their points using culturally relevant analogies and metaphors to broaden one's understanding of a subject. Consequently, I've always appreciated the Dhamma talks given by contemporary forest practitioners such as Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Sumedho, my peers, and others. Their teachings can be quite penetrating because rather than expressing the Dhamma using stories and analogies found in the Pali Canon, they use pertinent examples from our times and our culture to elucidate the principles. And because aspects of these teachings often derived from the teacher's own direct meditative experiences and insights, they can suggest different ways in which to work at overcoming suffering. A more scholarly monk, on the other hand, might typically expound the teachings by making reference to the ancient texts and presenting examples and stories that were believed to be from the Buddha himself. Why this traditional sutta-based approach to teaching the Dhamma has been the cornerstone of Theravada Buddhism for over 2.5 millennia, there's also been this oral, unrecorded transmission of ideas that has existed since the time of the Buddha. This more unconventional way of reflecting on the teachings can sometimes be controversial, but it certainly wakes you up. If you're used to hearing a teaching in one way, and then it's presented to you in another way, that's valuable because it makes you re-explore the teaching rather than just routinely agreeing with it in a manner that does not inspire you to apply it to your own life. For this reason, it's very helpful and important to get different perspectives on the Buddha's basic teachings. Ajahn Dune was another monk in the Thai forest tradition who could present the Dhamma in an entirely new light. Ajahn Dune was born in 1888 in a village in Surin province in northeast Thailand and ordained at the age of 22. He was a town monk for several years until he got fed up with all the rituals and left for Ubon to study the Dhamma in greater depth. Several years later, he met the esteemed Ajahn Mun, who was a great ascetic wanderer. Ajahn Dune was so inspired by his teachings in the forest practice that he reordained in Ajahn Mun's sect, himself becoming an itinerant forest monk under the guidance of his accomplished teacher. In the course of his wanderings, Ajahn Dune practiced meditation continuously and lived a very simple, austere life, much like the hermit monks of China. After almost 20 years of wandering in the forest and mountains of Thailand and Cambodia, Ajahn Dune was called back to Surin by his ecclesiastical elders. He was then asked to become the abbot of a town monastery, which would have been a challenge for him. He remained at the busy, academically oriented monastery of Wat Burapha for the next 50 years. It probably was not his cup of tea, yet he agreed to serve in this way. Ajahn Dune was famous for not giving Dhamma talks, yet he was generous with his advice and made himself available to anyone at all times. His teaching style was more satsang and involved exchanging questions and answers within the context of a genuine spiritual gathering. Ajahn Dune's teachings were succinct and very powerful, including one given on the Four Noble Truths. Skip ahead a little. In 1956, Ajahn Dune reformulated the Four Noble Truths to read, "The mind sent outside is the origination of suffering. The result of the mind sent outside is suffering. The mind seeing the mind is the path. The result of the mind seeing the mind is the cessation of suffering." He's rearranged the traditional order of the Noble Truths, second, first, fourth, and third. You could spend a lifetime contemplating this unconventional approach to the teachings. Since Ajahn Dune stated that the cause of suffering is the mind sent outside, you might begin by asking yourself, what does outside mean? In Buddhism, the idea of outside isn't a physical location like the foyer of this building. Rather, outside in this context refers to any object of consciousness that the mind goes out to, including bodily sensations. For instance, I might be sitting in meditation and my knee suddenly begins to hurt. I start to get restless and look at the clock. There's 20 minutes left in the session, so my mind starts to think about those 20 minutes. I begin to wonder, what if this pain gets worse? Should I move my leg? As a result of the mind getting snarled in physical discomfort, a sense of self gets born, as well as a sense of time. Because my mind has gone out to the pain, I'm now experiencing the truth of Ajahn Dune's second statement. The result of the mind sent outside is suffering. The suffering isn't the physical discomfort in my knee. It's all the other stuff going on that's leaving me feeling agitated and upset. It's important to remember that something which is unpleasant, such as loud traffic noises, extremely cold weather, or fear, is not dukkha. The unpleasant becomes dukkha only when I get caught up in it. What do I mean by that? All of us have experienced physical discomfort of some kind, and it's not suffering, it's just discomfort. Discomfort is natural. It's part of the human condition. When does it become suffering? When there's the aversion to it, which makes it feel even worse. The worrying about how long it will last, the wanting to get rid of it, the attempts to distract oneself from it, and so on. In this way, we fully go out to the physical displeasure. So I'll stop there.